She's on 3rd, right? Do you have a contact for her? Well, welcome everyone to this workshop for caregivers. The Mount Cross Care Team has been working in partnership with the Extended Health Ministry in Camarillo to put this on. And as I look at you and know some of your stories, and the stories that I don't know, I'm sure, are equally inspiring, but it made me think of one of the readings that we had in church this morning, and I know some other churches too that follow the Revised Common Lectionary heard it, but there was this line from 1 John, "No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us." And that's what caregiving is. It's about love. It's love day in, day out. The hope today is that you will know, if you are involved in caregiving, that you are not alone, that there's a community to support you. And I think all of us will leave here feeling much more grateful for the caregivers that have brought us to this day throughout our lifespan. So it's my honor, my name is Pastor Julie Morris, to welcome you to the Mount Cross Sanctuary, to welcome you to this workshop. I get to thank all those who've been involved in preparing and planning for it, and I get to open us with a prayer. So let us pray. God, you know how precious the time is of caregivers and how they have eked time away today to be here. Thank you for the generosity of planners and speakers. Please send your Spirit that this will be nourishing, comforting, inspiring, and guiding. We pray in the name of the Good Shepherd who cares for all of us and knows us by name. Amen. Okay. And Terry Helton's doing last-minute texting to be in touch with another speaker. Do you need me to take over giving directions or anything, Terry?
I just sent her the address.
Okay, all right. And now I get to introduce you Terry Helton, who has many roles, many titles, wears many hats, but today it is Terry Helton is part of the Health Ministry Partnership. Welcome, Terry, the moderator.
Yes. Thank you for being here. Many of you I've met before. I apologize if I don't remember names. But as I wait, that was the final speaker who needed the address, right? So some of us, things happen. And so I wanted to get that to her very quickly. I want to say a few words about caregiving because most of us in this room are not on the other side of 40. We're on the opposite side, approaching the later part of age. And caregiving is not just for us who are aging. Caregiving happens to many levels. There are parents who are caring for children as adults. They started with their children as their family when their children were little and they had many needs. That's a form of caregiving. And I don't want to leave that out of the picture. It is also important. And then as we age, those same people will suddenly be caring for their aged parent and that aging child. So they have a very difficult time. So that is part of the picture. And it may not be what we're talking about today specifically, but I wanted to bring that to your mind. So also what I want to bring to your mind is what you hear today is going to be some stories that you hopefully can relate to and some needed information. And as we finish, I would like you to visit the pavilion to pick up resources that are out there for your advantage. So saying that, I have had the privilege of knowing Tammy Glenn. How long has it been? Decades at least. So most of you know that I used to work for Livingston Memorial Visiting Nurse Association, and when I retired from there, Tammy wanted me to come talk to her. So we've grown our affiliation and our love for each other, and that's how I've gotten to know her and know that she's been a caregiver since she was a child. She was caregiving. So I talked about adults caring for children. Children care for adults sometimes. And one of my young memories was coming out to California to spend it with my grandmother, and I was suddenly caring for my grandmother at my aunt's house, who had diarrhea, couldn't get up and take care of herself. And I was not trained, and I was learning how to change her incontinence as an 11-year-old child. So it happens all the way around. So I get this empathy. Tammy is amazing. She runs Caregivers, Volunteers Assisting the Elderly for Ventura County. There will be information out there for you on her organization and the importance of what it does to try and keep everybody housed where they want to live. Does that make sense? Okay. The other person I get to introduce who will be following Tammy is Dan Nelson, and he's not a stranger to most of you in this congregation, but he has a current story of caregiving and what he's learned from our local Camarillo Healthcare District and how important that is. I'm going to read this that you sent me, okay? So he retired in February 2024 following 26 years of naval active duty and 17 years as senior engineer for the Naval Submarine Fleet. This guy has already done a lot of work. My wife, Karen, has had ongoing health issues for a number of years, making it difficult to stand for any period and inhibiting walking short distances without needed rest. Following stent replacement in her heart area in July 2023, suffered a heart attack and revived following number of attempts. As a result, she needed assistive devices in the bathroom, required a cane and walker for movement, a CPAP for sleeping, ongoing occupational and physical therapy from St. John's. She needed nutrition classes, working with a full-time caregiving, and retired from work. He retired from work in 2024 to take care of her. His full-time job was something that he had not been trained for. And you make me think of all of this. He was her person to transport her to different appointments, to take care of her at home, and make sure that things happened. And suddenly, this came over time, right? And part of my announcement at my church to get people to come here is I had this happen overnight to me. Was one day, 2.5 weeks ago, I couldn't stand up on my own, and I said, honey, I can't get up. And suddenly we were at a Methodist church picking up a walker to help me get to the doctor's office to have it assessed. And for the next 2.5 weeks, he became my caregiver and transporter, minor compared to what this gentleman has done. So you can become a caregiver overnight. And sometimes it's just more than we can understand. So I am going to stop talking now. I'm going to let Tammy tell her story, but I wanted to bring it back to reality, that this really does happen. It can happen quickly or it can happen slowly. Tammy, please.
Well, thank you for having me here today. I'm Tammy Glenn, and I wear a lot of hats. Today I'm going to tell you about my journey as a family caregiver. Next slide. I grew up in the Valley. I'm a Valley girl. I grew up on Addison and Van Nuys, just down the street from Otto's Pink Pig, if anybody remembers that. And that in the far back there is the apartment. There was an olive tree outside that I used to climb. And next slide. My parents were apartment managers. It was the 60s. I don't know if you can tell by that photo of my dad and my mom with his goatee and everything. My dad is a musician. My mother was a writer. And they did a lot of wonderful projects, some of which you probably haven't heard yet, but I'm still hopeful that you'll hear their scripts and music out there. If you live in Los Angeles, you have to have a script or two in the works, and they finished several of them, The Funny Little Riverboat, The Peephole, Princess Rosebud's Unusual Curio Shop. They wrote lots of love songs together, always dreaming, right? Lots of good dreams about what the future could hold. Next slide. We also had a family psychic because, we lived in LA. And so when I was 6 months old, my parents took me to the family psychic, George Darius, and he predicted that I would live the life of Cinderella. So I'll let you determine if that's happened yet. Maybe it has. When we weren't dreaming or preparing for me to go to college, my parents were planting seeds of me studying at Oxford in England, so they had big ideas and big plans. But when we weren't doing that, they took care of up to 3 apartment buildings. And I developed a strong set of skills. Even at 4 or 5 years old, I would follow my dad around, and I would watch everything he did, and he would let me screw the little plates onto the light sockets and things like that. He taught me how to use a squeegee, and he could do that whole, sweeping motion on the window right down to the corner, just a drop, and then you'd wipe the water off. I helped learn to reconcile rent payments and fill out deposit slips. Lots of good things that I think kids should learn. And you can go to the next slide. I had some success in Hollywood. At the age of 9, I got to do a bicentennial special with Bernadette Peters, Jason Robards. What's that? That's me. That's me with Bernadette Peters. I'm doing a duet. I got written up in Variety because my vocal work was apparently pretty darn good. Who else was in it? Flip Wilson, Jason Robards, Gene Stapleton. I actually was in the studio singing some of my recording stuff with Gene Stapleton. Lots of good memories. I was a regular model for Bloomingdale's. They would call and ask for me. And I'm probably I'm 9 years old there. The Christmas before that, my mother had an accident. And so my career was derailed before it really even got off the ground. You can go to the next slide. So I was 8 years old. I've shared this story with my friends. I've never shared it publicly. So this is a first for me. We had just finished opening Christmas presents, and I got the coolest little camping set. And it had this fry pan, and you could put a little water in it, and it had a plunger. And I put my rubber egg in there, and the egg was frying and sizzling and popping. And right in the middle of my egg, there was a huge scream from the kitchen. And my dad rushed to get my mom, and I can see him holding his hand up, stay put, don't come in here. I think he was probably standing there trying to determine if my mom was alive or if she was dead. She had been gifted an electric skillet that morning, and the skillet was defective, and it shot electricity through her body. She was making the Christmas ham, right? The pineapple, the little cherries, I remember it so vividly, cloves around everything. And she was still in her nightgown, barefoot. It was just the right set of ingredients for a defective skillet to throw this woman across the kitchen. And so I guess, she did survive it. But in the blink of an eye, with a bolt of lightning, our lives changed that instant, right? It happens that quickly. And my dad and I became family caregivers. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So from the age of 8 to 10, I was still in elementary school. I was absorbing a lot of new responsibilities. One of the first things I remember my dad teaching me to do was to make a pot of coffee. We had that good old percolator. And apparently coffee was very important, and an 8, 9-year-old should be able to do this. And I had this, listen to the 8-year-old in me. If they could drink a cup of coffee, I ought to be able to drink a cup of hot chocolate for every cup that they made. So every time I served them a cup of coffee, I would make myself a cup of hot chocolate. And I couldn't keep up with them. They drank a lot of coffee. I had to learn how to brush my hair. It was down to my tush and stick straight. My mom used to do that for me, but she couldn't use her hands. By that afternoon on Christmas, my mom could not use her hands. I started learning a whole set of, new chores, extra chores around the house. I remember going grocery shopping with my dad, and he would hang out in the magazine section, and I would do all the grocery shopping, and then I'd meet him at the checkout, and he would hand me the checkbook, and I would write the checks out and pay the groceries. That worked really well later on when I got a driver's license, I'm sure. My dad and I would spend the next 17 years of our lives caregiving to my mom. And later on, he worked in the printing business, and he worked a swing shift. So when I would come home from school at 3 in the afternoon, my dad would get ready to leave for work, and then I would be on the 3 a.m. to 2 a.m. shift, 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift. And when my dad got home at 2 in the morning, he would wake me up. I would be in bed with my mom, and I would go to my bed, and he would crawl into bed with mom. And then somewhere probably around 7 in the morning, she needed some personal help, so I would go in and help her with the urinal. And my dad was usually pretty tired, as you can imagine. And I would get ready to go to school, and I'd catch the bus and go to school, and we'd do it all over again the next day. And that's how we got through it. Next slide. By the time I was 12, I helped my mom use a bedpan for the first time. We both cried through that. By the time I was 17, I was feeding her. Her hands got really deformed. Later I found out in my 20s, I think I was doing some research, people either die from a major electric shock or they fully recover. And there is a small segment of documentation where people have what my mom had happen, which is, I don't even know what to call it. I've always called it a funky form of rheumatoid arthritis. Fever in the muscles, muscle spasms, the joints were pulling apart, kind of like rheumatoid arthritis will do. And the synovial fluid, she would have big bumps on her joints. It was hard, and there really wasn't much that you could do to treat it at that time. So we can go to the next slide. This is my mom and me. This is the last photograph. This is the last time I can remember her able to stand and give me a hug. So the photo looks good, but I have to tell you, this was not an easy photo for her to do with me. It's one of the most precious moments to this day. And that little guy down here, this is Aloysius. I told you my parents were writers. This is the first little character that my mom created for me. He's a little grasshopper, and he gets lost in the forest, and that's Aloysius. He is screaming for help. And I, too, was screaming for help for a lot of years. My dad kind of put his foot down in a way and said, this is our family. This is what we've got to step up and do. If we were on a farm, we would all have to pitch in, and that's what we did. And I have to tell you, that farm story got me through a lot of years, and dreams got me through a lot of years, because it's not easy to be a caregiver when somebody's totally bedbound. It's not easy to be a caregiver, period. You can go to the next slide. Thank you, Terry, my friend Terry. Thanks for having me here. These are my half-sisters. These are my mom's daughters from another marriage. They are 16 and 20 years older than me. And they had their own lives. And by the time this accident happened to my mom, they were married. Heck, Terry got married a month before my parents got married. And they were busy. They had work, they had husbands, they had children. You can go to the next slide. So here I am with their two eldest children, Terry's eldest daughter and Debbie's eldest son. And that's me with the little pigtails, Auntie Tammy. Yep, because, if you live in LA, you got to have a, what do you call that? An evolving family, right? Divorced families, all things kind of happen. Extended family. I don't think it's, that they weren't trying to take care of their mom. I think it was just that life happens, and this is where we were at. So You can go to the next slide. I wrestled with this for a lot of years because she was their mom too, and I really didn't feel like we were all pulling our equal weight as daughters, to be really honest about it. And so when I was 22, my sister, Terry, summed up this statement, and you can close your eyes because Terry and I have the exact same voice. I've actually fooled her husband with my voice. And I remember calling her after some episode with my mom and wanting whatever help. I'm calling out like Aloysius. And she said to me, you know, Tammy, you have your house and I have mine. I have 18 million things to do, a business and a 9-year-old, but I want the opportunity to help you, if I can. And so let's just say, you know, we weren't the family that I wanted us to be. And everybody's got 100% of their pie, and you can only deploy all of that so many places. And so I just have to realize, like Terry and Debbie could only deploy so much, right? You can go to the next slide. Nobody says when I grow up I want to be a caregiver. Oh, maybe somebody says it. I didn't say it. Terry wanted a normal relationship with her mom, and for her, that relationship meant being able to call her every morning around 8:30, have a quick check-in call, and then come over every week or two and have coffee. And I think her husband wanted a normal life for their family and didn't want his wife, being swept away to go do this caregiving stuff all the time. I remember him calling me, I don't know how old I was, 17 or 22, saying, can't we put your mom in a nursing home? And so, no, that wasn't really an option for us. Not for my dad and me, and not for my mom. It certainly wasn't for my father and me. Debbie, on the other hand, she lived over an hour away, same situation. So the family dynamics are tricky, right? You can go to the next slide. We poured 100% into my mom and dad and me in our home, and we held on to those dreams. And it's hard. It's hard to make change, right? Change, sometimes it's just forced on you. My mom died nearly 30 years ago, and it was only about 2 years ago that my dad kind of put all those dreams aside and recognized, I don't know, they're not going to happen, or they're not going to happen yet. Meanwhile, I built a career in journalism and major gift fundraising. I worked at Cal State Northridge for many years. I worked as the special sections editor at the Times. I earned a master's degree from Pepperdine. I'm very proud of that because I was the first woman in my family to go to college at all. Next slide, please. My personal and my professional life collided about 12 years ago when I was invited to serve as the executive director for a local nonprofit here in Ventura County called Caregivers. It just brought everything I knew all came together. It's the joy of my life to serve all of you in this county. And I also lead the National Volunteer Caregiving Network now, which is volunteer caregiving literally throughout the country. It's an extraordinary mission. And it's not the right fit for everybody, but you're welcome to talk to me about it. So next slide. Here's what I have learned. Is this the caregiving puzzle? Yes. So I want you to think about caregiving as puzzle pieces, right? There's a lot of resources out here, and not all of them will serve you well at any one time, but I want you to try to be aware of all of the different pieces and puzzles, things that are out there. The fact that you're here today is huge. You're tapping into your community. Terry said that earlier. I just want to reinforce that. My dad and I never got to go to anything like this. I don't even know if they had anything like this in the 70s or the 80s when we were doing this caregiving stuff. You can next slide. We've got not only a lot of new resources that have bubbled up, we also have the internet. That did not exist when we were caregiving to my mom. And so with all of this, the next thing I want you to think about is when it's time to take a break. Are we on? Yes. And the best thing I can tell you is think about that airplane story, right? When you're on an airplane, you put your oxygen mask on first. And you have to take care of yourself if you're going to take care of other people. It's really, really important to do that. Your financial health, your mental health, your physical health. I have such cumulative back injury from lifting my mom sideways out of bed over the years. Those are things that you can actually learn how to do better so that you protect all of you. Next slide. So when my mom died, my dad was the age I am right now, practically. I thought about that preparing this presentation. I'm like, goodness, he was about 55, 57, 58, somewhere in there. He looked so old at the time to me, and it's not because I was a little girl, it's because the man was exhausted. He was physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted, and he had just lost the love of his life. And the day that she was dying, he did give us a ride to the hospital, but he needed to get back to work, and I think he needed to get back to work because he could not face the fact that she was leaving us. And I guess he thought I could because I stayed with her. So when she died, it's hard to shake off being a caregiver, especially when I was looking at my dad thinking, he really needs me. Next slide. But I will tell you that life does go on, and you make new moments, new memories, new dreams. There's my dad playing music, and this is my husband, David. And we do have some extended family, but this is my immediate family. I'd hoped that my relationship with my sisters would improve after we took that caregiving piece with my mom out of the equation. I can tell you it's in a nosedive even today. It might have even just crashed and burned. I don't know. So things happen. The next slide. This is also my family. This is my little buddy, Teddy. And I put him in here because no matter how hard I try, I can't get away from caregiving. There's a part of me that kind of wants to on the physical side. But this little dog that I adopted during COVID, within a month, he needed spinal surgery. Spinal surgery. Okay, so, and then there's the recovery period. And then he had a second spinal surgery because, I'm not going to put him down. I'm not going through that loss. So what I can tell you, though, is we made a good decision. I had to live with the decision. It was either David, my husband, and I were going to either put him down or do this surgery. And I said, if you put him down, that's your call, but I can't do it. My dog can wag and his tail, and he can poop on his own. And that there is a lot to be said for being able to poop on your own, whether you're a dog or a person. Next slide. So tough decisions, right? You spend thousands on spinal surgery. One of my friends said to me, oh my gosh, putting my mom in a home, that would be like trying to put my dog down. I'm like, whoa, what a comparison. But it feels like that, right? You got to compare things to whatever you know. And that's a tough one because going into an assisted facility wasn't an option for my dad and me. It's not my favorite option, but remember those puzzle pieces that I told you about? When you're putting all those things in front of you, you need to put all of your options in front of you, all of them, even the ones you don't like, the ones that you say, I will never, ever do that. Put it on the table because it is an option. It's a choice. All of these things are choices, and that it doesn't always mean that this is the right choice, and sometimes that's the best choice. You have to put the puzzle together to fit you. So, next slide. So what's that? When your performance is not meeting? So I was trying to think about how to share this with you in terms of decisions. I suppose if you're asking the questions, should we be making a change? Yeah, maybe you should, I don't know. But here's what I thought about. I think when you move beyond the place where your family and the people around you only see you as the caregiver, and they forget that you're their sister or your daughter, then that to me is a time when you really need to take a break. You need to pull back, put the oxygen mask on, catch your breath, and think about it. Maybe bringing in some help, a professional caregiver who's been trained to do this, might be a really good thing, because maybe then you can actually reclaim yourself, and you can be the daughter or the sister, and they can be your mom or your dad or your wife or whatever it is you're dealing with. No, last slide. How'd I do, Terry? Is that 20 minutes? She said, "You've got a lot of slides." So today, I'm 57 years old. I will tell you that I do not have the strength to be a family caregiver anymore. I can tell you that honestly. I did this about 4 years ago for my father when he had open heart surgery. I stayed with him 24/7 for a month. I would not allow him to go to rehab because I could tell the situation he was in, and I just didn't want him in there. He had hospital brain. I needed him home where he was surrounded by his musical instruments and he could find himself. He'd never been hospitalized before. And so I brought him home, and they're like, "Are you sure you can do it?" I'm like, "I've got this." Well, my body had aged quite a bit. I do have cumulative back injury. And it was tough. I'm so glad we did it. We got him to a point where he could stand on his own 2 feet. He was toileting himself. He was bathing himself. He was in a good place, and quite frankly, I had to get back to work. But once again, I encountered the back pain, mobility issues, urinals, and family dynamics. Once again, they're always there. So don't think that that's unusual. I field hundreds of calls at caregivers in Ventura County, and I can tell you that none of us are going through that unique of an experience, sadly to say. So it is okay to step back. It's okay to let someone else step in and be the caregiver, so that you can be a daughter and a father again. And I wish that for my dad and me more than anything. And I'm really honored to share this microphone with Dan Nelson and with Jennifer and Assisted Living Connections today. You're going to hear some more good stories. And I'm always here. Don't hesitate to call me if you want to talk or if you need something. Thanks so much for having me today.
Just as an aside, you were given some 3x5 cards when you came in. Please write your questions down, and we will do that at the end of question and answer time. And you have reminded me, Tammy, and I didn't mention this at the beginning, that we think about caregiving, that there's an end to it, and sometimes there's not an end. And we need help with that, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But sometimes the person who needs caregiving outlives the caregiver, because we do not look at that story. And that's happened more than once. So as we talk about this, that is something to take into consideration. So as we're going to move to the next speaker, so Daniel, if you could come up and do that, I appreciate it. I will find. No, you're in the middle here.
Oh, gosh.
But I will help
Let
you
me
get
grab
your.
my little props here.
And Tammy, you can see where you're at here to tell me to move.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Tammy that. I know. I wasn't going to interrupt you.
Let me sit on my little stage here,
Okay.
my little candles.
Did I take my stuff?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Tammy, for such great, wonderful stories and so meaningful. I'd like to begin talking about a home emergency kit. We've all seen these. They have water, food, flashlight, first aid kit, batteries, and a candle. But I really want to talk about a different kind of emergency kit, and that's the caregiver. That kit is the caregiver. That emergency, unforeseen, when you least expect it, will it be needed? It could be acute, chronic condition, or spouse, family member, loved one. But today I want to talk about how you can have a caregiving emergency kit ready should care receiving enter your life. I want to add a little to myself about the bio. I'm so thankful for the assist from Pastor Julie and the Mountain Cross Care Team. They've been there in so many ways for loving support on a weekly basis, including home visits, prepping, helping me find therapy. They're just a phone call away if I ever need help. And the Mount Cross Care Team is an ongoing part of our lives in its love, caring, and support. I just can't overstate that. So in February, I sought out a caregiver class through Camera Health District. I completed a 5-week course and retired from work in February 24 to focus on the priority of caregiving part in my life. I have 2 candles here. There's the caregiver and there's the care receiver. They're strong, they see eye to eye. But you see how they start to flicker. They start to lose that energy. They start to lose that battery. That's the way I was. What do I do then? Daily prayer. I listen to my heart. I take a break to meditation and breathe. There are some great online apps like Abide, which is a daily devotion app I use. Calm, which is the meditation app. I use that in the morning. I have a list of friends that I call. If I need help, if I get on a kind of a ledge, I can call them and they can get me off that moment. How thankful. But if I lose the light, I lose my caregiver. I lose me. I'm no good to myself or the care receiver as a caregiver, because that care receiver depends on your light to keep their light lit, both of yours. There's a great word from Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. That's with my wife. She lights that flame. She keeps me motivated. She's the carer, I'm the care receiver. We work with each other. Next. Some real-world examples of caregiving. A daughter taking care of a mother who has dementia and a father who has muscular dystrophy. A daughter caring for a mother who has cancer and dementia. A daughter taking care of a mother who's homebound, just not doing well. A spouse caring for a spouse diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. And a spouse caring for a spouse who has spinal stenosis. They've fallen and they can't walk. These are any one number of types, not only spouses, children, any loved one that you might come across. But these come across you all of a sudden, and you have to deal with it on the moment. Next slide. Caregiving can be acute or chronic. Acute generally is conditions develop suddenly and often last for a short time. After experiencing an acute condition, people are likely to return to the trusted place where they were beforehand. There's a path there that they can return to where they were. It often has a defined cure or treatment. You're dealing with certainty. I know how things are going to be. While there is no single universal definition of acute conditions, many healthcare professionals define them as lasting anywhere from less than 3 months to 6 months. Conversely, chronic conditions develop slowly and may affect a person over an extended period. They are long-lasting. People with chronic conditions are unlikely to return entirely to the way of life they were before they developed the initial chronic symptoms. So change is normal. You're going to have to deal with change. You won't know what that change is, and you're going to have to deal with uncertainty how things are going to go. Generally no cures, and it's long-lasting. Next. Now, how do I manage self-care as a caregiver? Take responsibility for what's going on. It's there. I can't run away from it. I have to deal with it. Have realistic expectations of what you can and can't do. You're not a doctor. You're not a psychologist. You can't cure. If you get beyond that point, then you need to refer beyond that, but do what you can. Focus on what you can do to help get that care receiver through the day, through tomorrow, through next week. Communicate effectively with others. Unless you reach out, no one's going to reach to you. You have to communicate out to those resources, to those people to get help, because you can't do it by yourself. Deal with emotions. I went through some therapy, meditation, as dealing with emotions. And it was like first time, how do I deal with this? How do I get through this? I've never experienced things like this before. Set goals and work towards them. I make out a plan for the following week, which includes me time for reading, me time for going out for a walk, me time. That's very, very, very important, because you have to thrive while caregiving. Next. Some of the caregiving challenges is sometimes can be difficult for people to realize they're a caregiver, because they may feel, well, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just taking care of their spouse, parent, or child, friend, or neighbor. Well, it's what any decent person would do. They caregive. But caregiving is difficult. And it can take a heavy toll physically, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. You feel like you're losing yourself or losing who you are. You don't want to get to that point. Because like I said before, if you lose yourself, you're no good to you and you're no good to anybody else. You never feel like you're doing enough. You could be losing relationships with family members. Maybe family members see it a different way. I've always thought that in the initial caregiving steps, get the family together, have a strategy. How should we deal with this? Everybody has different ideas, so we all kind of get on the same page and working towards a common goal. Feeling extremely overwhelmed. You just never know from day to day how you're going to deal with the emotions. Some days are more overwhelming than others are not. Depression, dealing with that and what goes with it. Feel like you're in a dark place. Less sleep. Some nights are good, some nights are just not so good. Your role changes. It's no longer the role you were as a son, daughter, spouse. Your role has certainly changed, and you feel isolated. You need to take time for yourself. That's really the key thing, is finding, and it's easier said than done, because you're focused on taking care of that person. And how you do it, several ways you can do it: exercise, meditation. I got help with a therapist, helped me figure those things through and figure those things out. Take breaks. Take a vacation if someone can cover for you. Go to a movie. Go out for a drive. These things are very, very important. Next. Community resources. Caregiving is difficult and can take a heavy toll physically, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. Unsupported, it can lead to stress, anxiety, and burnout. It's your responsibility to tell others about your needs and concerns. Get help when you need it. Reaching out to help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. Community resources, volunteer caregiving, disease-related organizations, hospitals, family, friends, schools, faith-based communities, as in the Mount Cross Care Hotline Support Group. Camarillo Health District has a adult day program. They have a caregiver support group. They have the class I took, which was Powerful Tools for Caregivers. It's once a week, virtual, online, for an hour and a half. And I learned so very much. Gathered so many more tools for my caregiving toolbox. Next. Finally, I really do like this quote: "One person caring about another represents life's greatest value." How much more joy than you're helping someone, you're doing something for you, you're doing something. That's a value, it means so much. You can't even put it into words. You may think your light is small, but it can make a huge difference in other people's lives. You are truly that caregiver's world, care receiver's world. By keeping the loved one candle lit, I keep my own lit and light my own path each day. It's a very precious gift. And I have one final candle. God's light is always lit. He's always at the end of the path. And that you can bank on every day. Thank you.
This is going to be hard for Jennifer to follow. I'm going to put her, she brought me a thumb drive, I'll put it in. But I'm going to say briefly, as Tammy brought it up about those choices, he's talked about caring for yourself. Often we say we never want to put our loved one in a place. We don't want to have them go to a skilled nursing facility or an assisted living, a board and care. But as I said earlier, sometimes that caregiver dies before the person receiving care because we don't take care of ourselves. And Daniel did a great job of describing that. You were amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for
I will introduce Jennifer Davis, who is the newer member of Assisted Living Connections, who I have known the original owner, Tammy, and then Kalila. And there are not always organizations I trust, but I will tell you that I trust Assisted Living Connections. And this was confirmed to me on a meeting that Yvonne was on, and Tammy and Jennifer and I, because she's going to explain to you the financial aspects of placement, and that they will help somebody who has no funds, who doesn't have those savings that some of us do. And they will go to a place to talk to them about what that would cost and gets them to bring down the costs. You have to understand that decreases her pay. It's that organization, that company, that Morgan Care that pays them. It's not the family. So when she's asking them to reduce those costs for the family, she's reducing her pay. So that's part of the reason I trust them. It comes not just as a business, but from the heart.
Good afternoon. How are we doing today? Good. So far, I want one person, or maybe a couple of people, but I have one gift only, to really take what they've heard so far. One common denominator Dan and Tammy shared. One thing they said, it was important that you took it away, because being a caregiver, you're not doing this alone, right? That means, right, Dan knows that. Anybody else a caregiver here today? Anybody else have it? Oh, okay, good. So when you were a caregiver, are you still a caregiver? Yes. Okay, so as Dan mentioned, and as Tammy mentioned, you're going to have to take some time and do some things for yourself, right? But also, you know you have a village, right? That's really kind of where I'm going to start my talk from. It's about we are a village. And what does that mean? What is that? Okay, nobody. Everybody that's involved with this is answering, but nobody in the audience is. That's why I brought this gift, because I wanted to give it to somebody, you know. Oh, good.
Well, there's a level of commitment as a caregiver, as support for caregivers or care recipients that I think is a common thread that I've heard so far.
Oh, good.
And when we talk about we have community to support us, and to Gail's point, that wavers because their level of commitment isn't always the caregiver's level or expectations. That's what I'm hearing so far.
What is your name?
Scott.
Scott. Here, this is your light for the day. Come get it, okay? Come get your light. Okay. All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. As we all know, oh, good. I have another person want to participate.
Ordeal. And I want to say the caregiver family is the greatest caregiver. I was blessed with 3 EMTs in my family. Very knowledgeable.
Oh.
Without that, there would have been.
Now, that's a unique situation. I'll be honest with you. Everyone's not that fortunate. What is your name? Herb. Everyone's not that fortunate. Like Tammy mentioned, what I hear all the time is the family dynamic. You know, there's no one really there. You had EMTs. They're amazing, and they stepped up. Everyone doesn't step up always, and that's why it's good to know what your resources are. So today, that's all I'm really going to talk to you about is resources. I'm not going to really talk about my service. I'll leave that until the end. I really want to make sure I tap into resources because what I do pretty much Monday through Friday, sometimes on a weekend, I listen to families in crisis. As you know, we're aging, right? Yep. Hopefully, there you go. Because if we're not, wake up. I don't know if you should be here if you're not aging. Okay. We need to know our options. And I think that's the thing that I really want to drive home to you. When I say your options, you know, having caregivers, having family, that's great. But let's say you have a crisis, you go to the hospital, and who all has Medicare here? Okay, good. So do you know what Medicare covers? Okay, good. All right. So I'll drill down on that in 1 second. In 2020, some of us turned 65, maybe 74, and I was like shocked to understand what that meant to us. What that meant is that the people that are 65 and older, you're the largest group of the aging population. Give yourself a hand. Woohoo! You guys are the baby boomers, okay? Baby boomers, what does that mean? You know, this is huge. People are living longer. You know, back in 1940, people barely made it to 30. So being 65 and having Medicare is great. Yeah. Anyway, baby boomers are here. So that was one of the things I wanted to say. You guys are thriving. So happy that you're here and so happy to be part of that generation boom. Okay, so what does that mean? As I said, silver tsunami. You're baby boomers. And how are you prepared for aging? Have you asked yourself that? Of course you have. What are you doing? Are you exercising daily? Are you walking daily? But hey, guess what? You have an accident, and you have to go to the hospital, right? You have Medicare. You're covered, right? Okay. All right. So here's the option when you go to the hospital. If you are so fortunate and you have Medicare, that's wonderful. Some people don't have Medicare. Some people have Medi-Cal. Some people have Medi-Cal, Medicaid. What does that mean? Okay, what Medi-Cal means is that you have basically paid into an insurance that entitles you not to have to pay a high premium anymore when you turn 65. Medicare, I'm sorry. I always keep, because I say it so much. when you actually are paying an insurance now that has, your premium has dropped. And so Medicare is actually helping you not to pay so much health insurance, right? Well, it covers your office visits. You know that, right? Pretty much. You may have a small copay, but then you also have to have like a supplement. You know about that, right? Okay. And some people, they qualify for Medi-Cal. I'm not going to get into that, but they'll qualify for Medi-Cal because of its income-based driven. And sometimes they'll qualify for Medicaid too with Medi-Cal, which that tends to be where if you are in the hospital and you need maybe more, you need more long-term coverage and you need skill. So when you go in a hospital, you have a copay, you all know that, right? And sometimes if your income is a certain amount, then Medi-Cal picks up that portion sometimes, okay? But let's talk about caregiving. Caregiving, I need to bring this up. Some people do it because they're passionate about it. When I was a kid, that's all I thought about was taking care of people. I didn't know why, but I just was passionate about it. But if you have people in your family that can help you, great. If you don't, then you have to start looking at how much is it going to cost you, what covers it. Medicare does not cover it, guys. I need to bring that up. It's kind of a shocker when I tell people this. Who has Kaiser in here? Okay, so you know it's an HMO, right? So Kaiser has some great benefits. If you find the right doctor with Kaiser, it really does work. It also has in-home care benefits too, if you qualify for it. And that's the thing that Kaiser does offer, but it's where you have to find a caregiver that you can basically get subsidizing from Kaiser to pay for it, which normally is not what the market rate is, but you do get that. It's kind of like going through the county and getting in-home help services through the county. But your health insurance does not pay for a caregiver, quite honestly. Because your caregivers, if you do need a caregiver, let's say 4 to 8 hours a day, but most times you need 8 to maybe 12 hours a day. You're looking at Medicare doesn't cover it, Medi-Cal doesn't cover it, Medicaid doesn't cover it. And as I put in number 4, long-term care covers it. We're not going to talk about that right now, okay? All right, so we talked about Medicare coverage, what it means. What it means is that you have doctor's visits, and when you go to the hospital, it will pay a certain portion. When you get discharged, you might get home health. Have you heard of home health? Okay. Have anybody ever had home health? Okay, good. Good. So you know, home health is prescribed by a doctor. So that's why it's covered. Caregivers, not prescribed by a doctor. That's why it's not covered. Unless, of course, you have a lower income and Kaiser might set that up for you, or you might be able to get the county to help you. And sometimes, like I said, you get a certain amount of money towards that, but it's only for a few hours a week. It's not a lot of coverage. So Medicare covers office visits, covers home health, covers some of your hospital stay, and I need to bring this up, it covers skill, okay? And the reason why I am bringing skill up is because I get a lot of calls about that. When you're in a skill facility, a rehab facility, and you're there, like let's say Kaiser, for example, they might say, hey, you're 81 years old, you fell, you fractured your hip, we're not gonna do surgery on you, but they don't want you doing too much to agitate it. They want you to kind of be instilled, and you need a caregiver. That's what they're recommending. So you're thinking, okay, they're recommending it, so shouldn't insurance cover it? It doesn't. It doesn't. And once you get to a certain baseline at the skill facility, and you might not be moving that much, they'll discharge you. And what is your discharge plan? Who's your village? That's an emergency. Who do you call? I get those calls all the time. And I just want to drive home. Medicare, Medi-Cal, Medicaid does not cover your caregivers at home or outside options. It's really disheartening when I tell people that because, you know, we're aging. We're baby boomers. Hey, you know, this is the best years of our life, right? But we don't have a lot of coverage, or we don't really know what our coverage is, excuse me. So when you get discharged and you have Medicare or Medi-Cal, you go home with hopefully orders for physical therapy, which is home health, and sometimes come check your bandages by a home health nurse, and occupational therapy. That's all covered under your Medi-Cal, Medicare, and Medicaid. That's all covered. Only so many visits, though. A lot of that, unfortunately, is on you to make sure that you're following through on getting the exercises and following a range of motions, all the things that they tell you to do so you can get stronger, so you don't fall again. So that kind of gives you an idea about your coverage, I hope, right? Okay, all right, so as I kind of got ahead of myself. Non-coverage. Non-coverage is with your insurance is saying, they use the terminology in the hospital, I should tell you this, it's called your non-medical, what your care needs are non-medical. Well, I broke my hip and I can't move. Well, yeah, but now you're being discharged because you reach the insurance baseline of telling you you have non-medical needs. Well, I have a loved one that has dementia. I have a loved one that has a back injury. I have a loved one that can't go to the bathroom by herself or himself. He can't shower himself. He can't cook for himself. He can't clean for himself. That's not medical. Unfortunately, they call it social. Have you ever heard of that? I know if you've been in the hospital, you've heard of it. That's what they say is non-covered. You now are dealing with social needs, believe it or not. It's not part of your coverage. So how do you pay for that? What resources do you have? What I said here on this slide, how to plan. Maybe you might have long-term care coverage. That would pay for it. Anybody in here has long-term care coverage? Oh, woo, you guys rock. You guys rock. That is, I got in this industry when I was like, because I'm gonna tell you my age. Turning 40, right? So, and I've been doing this for 20 years, okay? And I bought long-term care. I did. I was like, I'm gonna have my coverage. I'm gonna have my coverage. After paying 15 years into it, I had to let it go. It was $500 a month, my premium, and I'm still healthy, you know? So I learned options of telling people if you got it and it's a really good price and you have a really good plan, stick with it. But if you don't, you also can look into talking to your life insurance agent. Talk to your life insurance agent. What they'll do is, if you have a life policy, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people do have a life policy, they can give you an add-on, which they call it a rider or a waiver or something like that. They can add that onto your policy, so it's called critical care. So when you get into a situation where you do need someone to help you in the home, and they're licensed, because you gotta have them licensed in order for the insurance company to pay for it, or you say, hey, Jennifer, I need your services. Find me a place. I have long-term care insurance, and I'll help you with that too also. But you can get that through your licensed life agent's if you want to look into that. So that's another option. And estate planning. Have you guys started talking about that? Because you guys are all over 65. You're doing estate planning? Okay, you guys are rocking, okay? That's great. I am impressed, all right? And the next thing, you've heard Dan, you've heard Tammy say, you guys have a village. You have to make a plan, because most plans will help you succeed. When you don't plan, you plan to fail. You need to talk to your community partners. Tammy, she works and runs a caregiving agency. Her story was so emotional to me because I relate and I get it, being a child, looking out for your parent, you want the best, and then dealing with family dynamics. She knows, she's dealt with it, and she's gonna look out for you, she's gonna advocate for you, and that's who you want. You want a person that's gonna advocate for you. When you're looking at in-home care, Dad, I do this to you, but, he's a good person just to kind of pick his brain. You got a good community here. You wanna pull and understand and channel what exactly do I need to do the best thing for my loved one or for myself. Because as we get older and we are aging, we need to understand what our resources are. We need to know who's going to go to bat for us when we're not even talking to them. You tell me your story, unfortunately, I wear it to bed. I will, do what I can, like Terry said. I work with families, and if I find that there's a certain budget, like this lady that lives in Camarillo, she kept telling me she wanted to work with me, and she kept telling me her budget was higher, and I says, okay, I'm showing you all these places, what's the problem? She told me, this is what my budget is. I says, okay, hold on. So I called everybody and said, this is her budget, no more, no higher, can you do it? And I found her a place. I mean, of course, I don't care. I make a lot less when I do that. But the bottom line is, guess what? She's happy, her husband's happy. And I feel good about it. And I can go, and I feel like, you know what, I did the right thing. So it's all about do the right thing when people are looking, when people are not looking. I believe in that. But most importantly, be connected to your community. This church is doing this. This is amazing. I wish all churches would do this because we're supposed to be a community of people. We're supposed to show our light. We're supposed to be, the God in us is supposed to shine. And for them to talk about caregiving, that it really, sends a message that they get that we're aging. They get that you guys don't know what your resources are. But now you have resources, okay? So take advantage of it. Okay. So, as I mentioned to you earlier, long-term care insurance. Would you believe it? Only 6% of our society has it. And it's hard to get it, honestly, it is. But you can, like Terry has it, go talk to your life agent if you get your life policy. It's worth it. It's worth it. Peace of mind, peace of mind.
I'll make a statement real quick. I heard this comment behind me. It is expensive, and we got it. Well, I'm 70, so I got it 11 years ago. My husband talked us into it. And then the crash in 2008 happened, and he thought about getting rid of it. And I happen to work in an industry that I know the cost of caregiving. And we have kept it. And they actually raised the costs with the
Cost of
caliber. No, because of 2008, they weren't recovering. Mm-hmm. They went to the commissioner and said, can we raise the rates? It went up 13% for 3 years. And he wanted to say, stop doing this, and I said, we can't. So I paid about $5,500 this year for both of us, but caregiving for 1 month, 24 hours to care for one of us, if we didn't have that, would be $24,000 minimum.
Could you just repeat that?
Repeat that.
$24,000 plus for 1 month of 24-hour caregiving. $600 and something. It is extremely expensive, and and I have a sheet out there in the resource center about caregiving and the state of California's guidelines and why you want to hire somebody who has a background check. And you can hire an individual. You know, there are people I trust. There's somebody in this room I trust, extremely trust, for doing caregiving, and they're not background checked and licensed. But generally, I would say don't do that. You need to have somebody who has a background check and you can be safe with. So you can tell I have strong feelings about that.
Thank you, Terry. But you know, like I said, talk to your life agent, because you can add it onto your life policy if you already have a life policy, because they have to do a health fitness for long-term care. And if you have a life policy, all you're doing is adding on. And what if it's only $18 more a month? Hey, peace of mind, people. I'm sorry, I get kind of carried away because I know the numbers, and she's being very nice about the 24,000. Actually, most of the time it's 30 a month, 30,000 a month.
That's 24-hour care.
24-hour care. Yes.
I'm just going to correct you. If you already have life insurance and want to add a long-term care rider, I don't think you can do it.
Oh, you can't?
You can do it when you get it initially,
Oh.
but you can't add it after the fact. You would have to get a separate plan.
So they can, you know, talk to your life agent. Okay, well, talk to him, okay? Talk to him, okay? Because I don't want to, you know, overstep.
You can ask this question after the fact. but-
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to overstep, but I just want you, you know, be educated. You know, it's all about, information is powerful. You know, if you don't hear what you like today, keep digging. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. So, what's next? And that is, I like this picture. It's like, hey, we're a village. Okay. The most important thing is, I want to say what's next is just tap into your resources, and thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I am here, and I also brought some things to help you out. I got to give this away. Do you all have your advance directive? If you don't, I brought some information sheets about that. So kind of, you know, trying to make sure you're prepared, okay? All right, thank you.
My apologies, Jennifer. We've been there. We did a whole series. We did a hospice and home health, too. So they know it's my heart. It's an interesting thing. I'm trying to get this. I'm going to pull it without checking. So it's time for questions and answers. And I can go with the microphone out there, and we're going to torture these poor people. So, but I have to tell you, you know, I do interfaith things, events and panels, and some of the best information comes out of the question and answers times. So I'm going to ask, can all three of you come stand up here? There's another microphone over here also. Oh, that's a long one. Okay, here's a question, and this is part of the resources, and they can answer over here too. This is teacher, I gotta see you. I'm a visual person. When I get old, where do I go and ask for help, like resources? Where can I apply to get help? And I'm going to answer this. First of all, you come to things like this and learn. When there's a seminar to attend to find out about advance directives, you go to that and you learn about it. So you take some opportunities for education that way. But the other places you can reach for resources for finding out about that, would you like to speak?
Camarillo Health District? They have. Yes, thank you. VCAA, AAA they have all that information. And then they'll refer you to Tammy, me, you know. your resources. That's the best way to do it.
So volunteer caregiving, caregivers, volunteers assisting the elderly, we work with 150 nonprofit partners throughout the county. And we often will be looking for resources even outside of the county because we field calls beyond the county border. So you're welcome to give us a call. We'll take time with you over the phone and really try to tailor where we send you. If volunteer caregiving can be helpful, we can certainly talk about that. And I had to laugh. What was the question? When I get old. How do you define that these days?
And it has changed. The
It
definition
has really changed. I don't know if that statistic was up here for Jennifer, but we have more people over the age of 85 in this country than we do, get this, under the age of 5. Yeah. So really, I always tell people, they'll walk in here, volunteers, and they'll say, well, I'm getting old. I'm like, you're mobile, you're moving. One person's 60 and one person's 85 and one person's 90. They don't all look alike.
Yeah. My husband used to say I was old at 60, and I said, no, I'm not old yet. No,
not at all.
no. Now I say old, but yeah. What are some good, effective actions you can take when the person that needs care only wants you to be their caregiver? Oh, that's an interesting question. What are some good, effective actions you can take when the person that needs care has forgotten you're the daughter, you're the mother, you're the spouse, and they only want you to be their caregiver? Their whole relationship has changed. Tammy, this is a...
Did you know that when you sit in your car, if you roll the windows up, no one can really hear you scream at the top of your lungs? It's a great release. Dan, that's a really tough one, right? Go ahead.
I would sit down with a caregiver. What are you looking for in a caregiver that I couldn't offer? Get to know the caregiver, what their needs and wants are, etc. That's where I would go. What am I not doing that you expect of me?
Yeah.
And then you can seek out other options that maybe they're more comfortable with.
And I'm also going to encourage you to look for some counseling. There are some wonderful resources for counseling in our county. Some of them are low cost. And sometimes it's good to just sit down and have a conversation and look at it from a lot of different sides of the equation.
Yeah, true.
My counseling was covered by Medicare, so.
It was covered by Medicare.
There you
So,
go.
and that is
And good that you
important.
sought that out. A lot of people don't seek out counseling. And Dan and I have both been to therapy, and it's fantastic. Not together. We should have gone together.
But he was military, and they told him like 7 months out that he could get a therapist. But the church, Pastor Julie,
We're all over it.
says that's not acceptable, and I will find you somebody.
Yeah, so that is part of going back to what Jennifer said, it's the village and knowing that there needs to be support. So,
We can get you therapy this week if you want to pursue it. You call me.
yeah, there's the problem with the therapist being there. Jennifer, you had a comment?
Yeah, I encourage it because I get calls like that all the time, and I'm a professional, but I'm not a therapist, and I want people like that to when they contact me to get the help that they need. So therapy is a really good way to support you, and maybe even to do like a family therapy session if you can when you have a situation like that.
Yeah. Hang on a minute, Planet.
There's also sometimes group chats. You don't have to leave your home. You can go on group chats. If you just need an emergency, I had that. I needed 10 minutes with somebody, and that's it. Because I'm a retired therapist, so I've been through all that.
Just make sure that you do a vetted group chat. And we can all help you get to that too.
And since we're on this subject, this next question is important, and please bear with me as I try to work it out. So there's a consequence of caregiving, guilt. And this comes back to that therapy idea. Did I do enough? Should I have done more? Being critiqued for what I do and don't do. And how did I do or didn't do it? There are several ways to pay for long-term care. Oh, that's a different question I'm going to come back to, but that whole conscious thing, the guilt. And I'm going to say this, and this has nothing to do with caregiving because I did it long distance, and I'm going to say I did a lousy job. When my dad died 20 years ago in May, I was there, and for the funeral, and 3 months later, my mom is having problems with falling, and she's living in Albuquerque, and my mom, daughters, mothers can have tension, and I knew that this was going to be an ongoing thing. So I thought, we'll take care of it long distance this time, and I'll go next time. And we got somebody to come in to do the weekend, and I didn't go. And my mom died. And to this day, that guilt of could I have made that difference? That's a caregiving guilt, even though I wasn't there. I was long distance caregiving. So the guilt does matter, and that therapy does matter. So, and I let myself go, I did the best job I could at that time. But it does make a difference. Do you have comments on that caregiving issue, the guilt?
The guilt it's a daily thing. Am I doing enough? Is there a boundary here? Because you don't want to go beyond a point that can only harm the care receiver. Where do I draw that line? But you always wonder if you're doing enough. And you look at the end of the day, did I do everything I could to help her get through the next day? That's constant. It's a hard thing to work with. But you find a way, and that's where therapy, that's where time to yourself and having that support around you helps you get through those moments.
Makes a difference.
Absolutely.
And something we haven't addressed here, and we're kind of in an unusual situation, is because that care receiver is here, that care receiver is also bearing an emotional burden. Is that true, Carl? Yeah. It is a two-sided story. We're talking about the caregiver today, but it is a two-sided story on how that care receiver is also going through it. So when Daniel reaches out to get support, he in turn is returning that support in a fresh way to his loved one.
Because the last thing she wants is to be a burden on me.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So.
And remember I mentioned 100%, right? We only have so much pie, if you think about it in a pie plate. And that's where you can, bring somebody else into the equation, bring in professional care. There are other resources that can lift some of that burden, spread the guilt around.
Yeah.
Well, you have to come back here with the mic. I just want to add one more thing for caregivers and for those that are getting the caregiving. For all of us, as we look at others in our family, our friends, our village, our church, is that support and how much that support of those people is, rather than questions and criticism. Because that comes from your family members or other friends or in the village only adds to that frustration and that guilt for people that they're already going through. So we need to think about that for others, about how we can actually just support them instead of trying to critique them.
Yes. Good. Okay. So we're going to move on to a little practical stuff here. Do you coordinate with the VA resources? Jennifer?
I I try to be the one-stop shop person, unfortunately.
Well, when I tried to get counseling in the VA, it was a 7-month wait. And that was online. And actually, the day was going to be Groundhog Day, which really didn't excite me too much. Because I didn't want to go through therapy over and over the same, day. But no, VA is very frustrating from that standpoint. That's why the church was here to help me find a more immediate help, and God bless them.
So, yeah, and that's my song about building the care team or health ministries, is we can be an additional support. Tammy, did you have any resource?
Well, the organizations that are on the front line helping you do this in the community, those community resources do build relationships with all kinds of organizations and agencies and government. And I'm not going to make any promises about the VA or anything, but I will tell you that we're really happy to be a squeaky wheel for you when we can.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Another squeaky wheel.
Yeah, and we've vetted a couple of people and we work with them, and we know they can actually help you. You're going to get results when you contact us. So I give you that person information, and you guys start talking to them. But we've already worked with them, so we're not giving you somebody that we just looked up. So that's another reason why we're a very good resource too.
Right. And Caregivers, Volunteers Assisting the Elderly has 150 resources on their wall.
That's just on the wall.
Yeah.
One resource that you haven't mentioned is adult daycare. Yep. It saved my life.
So you just brought up a really good point, and I actually have a flyer, a paper I developed that I have out on the pavilion that talks about different types of care, types of facilities, and the other side defines different types of care needed. So, and we didn't talk about it today, but there's a difference between a skilled nursing facility that we used to call a nursing home or a rehab now, and an assisted living and a board and care and an adult daycare. They all vary and the costs vary. So there's some explanation about that outside. And the other thing is I'm going to mention that Camarillo Healthcare District in particular, and they're only like one of 2 in the state and very few in the nation, does a very particular job. And one of the things they do is if you take a nutrition course, they will have you in their files. And if something happens that you may need more help, they can do case management, just as Volunteers does some case management, but they actually do some case management and can help with some of the things that you're talking about. It's the same idea. So those are important to know. And before we go on to more fundamental things, I wanted to remember that caregiving for you, taking care of the caregiver and support. There's a flyer outside from an agency that's not in our part of the county. It's in Thousand Oaks, Newberry Park, and they do a tremendous job as Senior Concerns. And once a year, they do a Caregivers Recognition Day, and it's for the whole county, and it's free to the caregiver, and it's a lunch. And let me tell you, I've moderated at a table. It is well worth attending to refresh the caregiver. So Daniel, if you can do that, I'd encourage you to do it.
Is that already been done this year?
No, it is May 7th. The flyer is out there.
I love lunch.
So, and this is the first time they've done it online during COVID, but they returned to having it in person. So that's a way to care for yourself as a caregiver. Then back to practical. There are several ways to pay for long-term care based on budget as a need. How do you let people know about those options? That's a hard one, right? Does it almost have to be a one-to-one?
Yes, everything as far as cost is individualized. When I work with you, if you're looking at skill, I talk to you about what the skill cost is. If, like, let's say you're in a skill facility and you're trying to say, I really don't know if I should even transition from here to a boarding care, what's the cost gonna be per day? And then depending on what skilled facility you're in, if you're in a room with 2 people, 1 person, private, everything varies. Residential home, we call them boarding cares, that also varies. Assisted living costs, that varies. I'm the specialist of that. I've been doing this since 2004. That's why Tammy and Kalila hired me, because I know a lot about it. I know how to get you in, meaning I know the requirements, I know the licensing requirements. You just can't move in with your suitcase. You have to do the necessary paperwork. The cost for a skilled facility runs anywhere from $375 to $550 right now a day. So it just depends. And a boarding care, it runs, $195 to $200 a day. It just really depends. Everything depends.
And here's part of that financial problem, and we haven't talked about it, but for hospice is under Medicare. It reverts to Medicare unless you're a federal employee, and then it's whatever insurance you took. So the problem in a skilled nursing facility with Medicare is they will cover the hospice part, but they don't cover the board and care. So hospice can be done in your home, it can be done in a board and care, it can be done wherever you live. So if you're living in your own home, that's your own board and care, right? And that's what they're considering in a skilled nursing facility. On the other hand, Medi-Cal will pay for board and care and hospice when you're in a facility. Just a side note on the costs. Assisted living facilities are available. Assisted living facility is available when you can't keep the person at home due to many reasons. How cared by long-term care insurance. Oh, I think this is a question about long-term care insurance and how does that work when you can't keep them at home. And that's going to be, and I can answer this, it's going to be determined by your long-term care insurance what you bought, what you're paying for. So some old ones only pay for the care if you're in a facility. Some of the newer ones combine that care whether you were in a facility or at home, and that is the kind of long-term care insurance I have, that it will not matter if we're in a facility or if we're at home paying for a caregiver. Does that answer the question for the...
Maybe indirectly to my question, but comment. Yeah, I do. Because I have long-term care insurance. I've been caring for my sister who has dementia, and she's, finally, I couldn't handle it any longer, or my other sisters, we just physically could not do it anymore. So, with the help of assisted living, your group, we have her locally here, but luckily, all of our sisters had all bought long-term care insurance because we were all widowed. And, of course, the cost of long-term care, if you're involved in it, it kept going up. You'd wait for 5 or 10 years, and then your group would go up a little bit. But then you could tailor back how much it paid. If you wanted to keep the same rate, then you how much it pays a day, would come down. And, you just whatever you could afford to do. Thank God all of us, we've all used it. 2 of my sisters have dementia and are in homes now. But it's hard for I'm a caregiver, my other sister's a caregiver, and we feel guilty a lot of times because we've had to put my sister in a facility with her dementia. But, she's happy, so, and I'm still here. And so sometimes assisted living does work out well when you can't care for, I'm sure with a spouse it's a little different story. But I've seen a lot of people like Dan beaten down. It's a tough thing.
And it's a hard time when you need to make that decision. When does that choice happen? So, and that's one of the questions here is somebody had this about dementia. Where are the available psych wards? But dementia, when do you make that choice for when somebody has dementia? How far along is that? What'd you say, Mary? When you can't handle it anymore. And remember what I did say, I actually have known people who the caregiver died before the person receiving the care. and one of them was somebody with dementia. And the other thing I want to remind us is Mary almost wanted to say she wasn't a caregiver anymore because that person is in a facility. She's still a caregiver.
That's a really hard question, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of people that I work with, they wait sometimes too long.
Yes.
And when they have dementia and the quality of life is not good, and you're doing everything in your life to make sure that because of guilt or because, you love your loved one, but I just hate when they call me and the person really is not doing well and they're gonna die. I had someone call me last week, and she had my number for a year, and she finally called me, and her loved one was just deteriorating. Took him to the hospital, and then he died, which was really sad.
Oh, there's lots of sad. Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get the point across about when it's time that you lose your identity and you lose yourself. If that person is progressing so far along, whether they have dementia or not, dementia is really it's a really tough situation. But if you can set it up so that you can actually reclaim that relationship and enjoy the time that you have left being a spouse or being a daughter or being whatever you are, a sister, you're able to be a sister again now, aren't you? That's a good feeling. You're still a caregiver, but you're a sister again. And that, to me, is one of the blessings. So maybe use that guilt as a measure that it's time to explore that option, because it's good to be a sister again.
That's perfect. Yeah. You actually reminded me, we have friends, and the wife said when they turn 80, they're going to move into an assisted living, and I'm going, you're not going to need one necessarily at that age. She said, well, my partner is not going to have the memory, and this way we will have time together. That actually makes sense.
That is so important. Here's what I really have not had experience personally with dementia, but I will make this observation for you. If someone's declining that way, it is better to make that move sooner than later. It is better for that individual to know that they're in a safe place, to identify those things that are on the wall and the new setting that they're in. That is the biggest gift that you can give to someone, because it's scary as heck, from what I've observed, to have dementia and not know where the heck you are. And so don't do that to someone. Get them situated sooner rather than later. It'll be good for all of you all the way around. And I still don't know when that time is, but you'll know it.
So, and that leads to this question, where are the available psych wards for dementia patients? Well, dementia is not it's not something we want to put somebody in a psych ward for. It's a deteriorating, actually, maybe we need to have, Yvonne, we're going to need to do something on dementia.
There's some beautiful communities, beautiful places that offer a place for a person that has dementia. I've worked in some of them. They have
memory care.
Memory care. They have their own apartment, and they have gardens, they have activities. It takes the load off of you as an caregiver. You become the family member, you become the sister again, you become the mom again, or you become, I do have moms in that situation, or you become the wife, or, the spouse. I'm sorry.
There is a cost for, and
While you're delivering the mic, make sure that you take your loved one and have them medically assessed. Don't assume that it's dementia. Don't assume that it's Alzheimer's. Don't assume it's a psychological issue. A UTI mimics dementia in older people like nobody's business. It may not be dementia at all, so make sure you get it professionally diagnosed.
Okay, so my husband did have dementia, Lewy body dementia.
Okay.
And he got so bad, he wanted, to kill me. And there was no facilities that were able to take him.
I know him. I know of a place.
Okay, well, I ended up putting him in a psych ward for, well, nobody else would take him.
So sad.
And there was no facilities in Ventura County, and he
But there
ended up in
is.
LA.
But there is, and that's where a professional like me can tell you, because I go to them, I talk to them daily, I know what they can and cannot take. But as Tammy mentioned, good point. In order to get into any place that is licensed for memory care or dementia, Lewy body, you must get a formal professional diagnosis. If you don't get, if they're not professionally diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's or a mild cognitive impairment, you can't move them in anyway, because the actual place that you pick out, they need that in writing for the state, because they're all licensed by the state. And the Lewy body, I've dealt with that for years. There are places that you won't take them, but I can definitely hold your hand and show you the places that will. So that's where me and my team, professional, background really helps you. Don't do this alone.
That is true. Don't do it alone. Do it with a medical provider. And Vicki, I understand the problem with that. That's an outside dementia. It can be part of the Lewy body, frontal lobe dementia. Pick's disease also. Yeah, they have to go in and have some chemical treatment in order to bring them in control. And she's right. There is not a place in Ventura County that does that. They have to go to LA. No, they actually need medication treatment. That's what I mean by chemical treatment. They need medication. So, yeah. But there are facilities that, and that needs that medical review, because maybe there's medications that they're taking that need to be eliminated, medications that need to be added. So it's complicated.
I need to bring this up because I work with the Alzheimer's Association, so it's important that if you have a loved one and they haven't been diagnosed with dementia, make sure that they have been, because a lot of the researches that they're doing and gathering information, they need to know that there's a large population here in Ventura County, so that they can start having the resources and the medical services available here. A lot of cases are undocumented here in Ventura, which is not good.
Yeah, we have it's a large population, actually. So, and there's one other thing I want to bring up before I bring this up that Jennifer alluded to in the caregiving and the cost, and that would be in-home health services, IHSS. And that is through the state of California, particularly through the county. There is training for that. Periodically, they do allow for more money for people. An in-home caregiver, such as Daniel, and this may not, I'm just giving it as an example, they will pay for the caregiving of that family member giving the caregiving. But those are, circumstances you have to apply for and check on it. They also pay for somebody to come in and do that caregiving, and they have the background check. Daniel, you were saying what?
No, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so that's why you talk to some people like caregivers who will have these resources in their back pocket, or Jennifer. So, yes?
One thing I did find when I was looking for caregivers, we have stairs at home.
Oh.
And that was a real problem because of insurance issues, because if the caregiver hurts themselves, that's a real problem. So we went through a couple different ones. Just couldn't get one to stay because of the fact that I have stairs in my home.
Wow.
So I almost throw my hands. And what they're willing to do at home as far as caregiving. Some just want to sit there and just, it's time for lunch yet?
Right, so you have a right to choose, and yeah.
It's a frustrating process.
So, and this is the problem with not having the money to have a paid caregiver through an agency. That agency will come in and do an evaluation and do a matching. I know that and Livingston Memorial does that, Livingston Caregivers does that. I know that Assisted does that, the other agencies who do that. That is part of being able to afford an agency who can do that. What caregiving expenses are tax deductible? What caregiving expenses are tax deductible? I don't think they are because it's part of daily living. Their insurance is not deductible. Long-term care insurance can be?
Certain levels.
Okay, so we're going to hit you up now because we had these questions. So, no, and this is really truly a question. We're going to go back to so some long-term care insurance can be deductible when
When you hit certain levels with your medical expenses as being a write-off.
Your premiums are deductible.
Oh. Do I need a break?
Well, we want you to be on camera. We want you to do the
Yeah, this is what I've been told at my
All right.
church, too. You got to be on the microphone.
Long-term care insurance can be tax deductible, but it has to hit certain medical levels with your expenses on medical insurance, medical costs, but long-term care insurance can be a write-off.
So it would not be a write-off for me now because we're not using it and we haven't reached that level.
No, if you're paying for it and you've got other medical expenses, you should give your premiums to whoever does your tax prep and say, do I qualify for any kind of a tax break because I've got long-term care insurance?
Okay, so that's interesting. I'm gonna go a little deeper for understanding. So I have Medicare Advantage, which is Jennifer alluded to as an HMO. So I have all of my Medicare A and B and D combined in a Medicare Advantage for Kaiser,
Correct.
right? So that's deducted from my Social Security payment on a monthly basis. So that's not an added expense, correct?
You're going to, the $175 a month for your Part B is probably not going to get you to the level where you need to have write-offs. The fact that you have a zero premium health plan, Advantage plan, you don't get any help there because you're not hitting levels. Some of us have Medicare supplement plans that those premiums can help get you to a level that maybe long-term care insurance can be written off. I can't say across the board, it's not a blanket statement. It's just something you should look into if you have it.
And that's why I wanted to clarify exactly what that
Absolutely.
meant. So the other question we wanted to clarify going back was adding to an existing policy, you cannot do that.
Well, it's because when you took out a life insurance policy, it was based on age and health. Now that you want to add a rider, all of a sudden companies are going to say, well, wait a minute, we need to do some underwriting here. You can't just add it as a rider. You would need probably to get a standalone long-term care policy. And I will tell you, in my business, I've got like a 4-step process based on age, finances, and health of what you can and can't do in terms of long-term care. So I can't even give you a blanket statement. I will tell you, though, from what Mary said, premiums go up or benefits lower. I have not written a traditional long-term care policy in over 10 years.
So saying that, when we were planning our expenses in retirement, we investigated with our financial planner this idea of having an insurance policy instead of the long-term care insurance, going back to the life insurance. And he researched the policy that we had, and he came back and he said, you need to keep it, because you're not going to get something like that again. And so
there's all kinds of different plans, and if you're interested, Yvonne or Julie or members of Mount Cross can give you my contact information. I didn't come here to do a sales pitch.
No,
to
but
you.
it helps people
understand.
understand.
I do want people to know that there are options out there that you probably don't even know about. But again, it's based on your age, it's based on your health, and it's based on your budget.
Yep.
So something can be found to help you out. And I will tell you this too, having anything is better than having nothing. Having something is better than having nothing.
We each had 3 years. You know, you buy, right? So many
Well, there's
years.
different plans. I mean,
And there are, yeah.
I don't wanna
back
get into all
in
that.
The day when we were doing it 20 years ago, you know, they said to get it, it will say, get it young
Yeah.
by 60,
Yeah.
because then your health is better than it's going to be at 70 or 80, and your premiums usually are less. Of course, I bought it a long time ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, at that time, it was expensive, so, you know, you would get 3 years, 5 years. I mean, people that take it out for indefinitely, but of course, that really, really costs a lot of money. But, you know, even if it costs, it covers for 3 years, you know, it's like $250,000.
Yeah.
And it didn't cost us really, you know, that much. I mean, but that was years ago.
Yeah, it's changed, so. Are there other questions that people have to ask? I would like to really extend my appreciation to Jennifer, to Daniel, and to Tammy for speaking today. And they will have their cards and the resources out there. There are really some good resources. Camarillo Healthcare District resource will be out there. The Living Well from the Ventura County Area Agency on Aging, and more. So, thank you. And refreshments. And yes, let's thank Susan and Yvonne for coming up with this. And Susan always brings the refreshments. She's amazing for that.
And thank you to Terry.
Terry, thank you for having us.